Hey everybody, how are you doing? I'd like to welcome you back to our Tuesday vlog, and today we're talking about a mother's love, the role a mother's love has in creating equality. Hey, welcome. Thanks for joining me. So I think many of you are going to be wondering where we get in this concept that a mother's love creates equality and why a mother's love. But first of all, let me ask you, have you ever heard a mother refer to any of her children as a bastard child? Um, I think the answer is going to be no. However, among uh, men, you're going to hear that man's bastard child. That's what you're going to hear. That man's bastard child. It's as though amongst men's children, some have more equality that is created by the social status of marriage. Whereas for a woman, all her children are just her children, right? um, so in when we think about this mother's love, that in a mother's love, you don't get to create um belonging by social status of the mother. The mother's social status has no relevance on her children. It's just a love that's extended to her children. We also begin to understand what God's love is like and how God's love is like a mother's love that cannot at any point in time cannot create inequality. Instead, it creates equality among the children regardless of how those children were conceived. I know that we often do not hear about the feminine description of God in the scriptures, but it's there. For example, many of us know one of the Hebrew names for God is El Shaddai. But how many of you know that Shaddai means the boobs, right? The breast is the God that feeds us with the breast. And I want you to think about this in terms of a mother's love. Have you ever seen a mother that will say, I'm going to give more of my boob milk or my boob comfort to one child and not the other? Have you ever seen a mother that thinks one of her children deserves her boobs and the other one doesn't? You're never going to find that. Instead, what you're going to find is mothers who give equally to their children. Even when mothers give birth to when they have multiple births, like twins or triplets or quadruplets, you'll notice that the mothers have this attitude or practice of switching the babies over equally. You know, this one is gonna suck from here for 2 minutes, then we're gonna switch you over to this breast for 2 minutes, then we'll go put you down, then we're gonna get the other baby. It's equal. And I want us to appreciate that if we all are sucking at God's breast of provision, that God in the provision, the Hebrew God, right? El Shaddai, the El Shaddai we're talking about, by virtue of El Shaddai's provision for humanity, all people are equal. God, El Shaddai, has no bastard children. So in that respect, we are looking in our social the social construct of our society, we're looking at a God who acts more like a mother than society fathers. I'm going to say it again. According to our understanding of this God that nurtures all of creation equally, on El Shaddai's breast, we're looking at a God that functions more as a mother than as society fathers. And in that concept, we're looking at a God that creates equality by virtue of nurturing all human beings on El Shaddai's breast. I know we can pick one or two examples here and there where people will say, oh, but mothers, you know, yeah, you may feel equally, but mothers, don't they have preferences among their children? I want you to stop and think. The biblical examples that we have where a mother may have picked a child over the other was to create provision for the weaker child. Now we're talking about equity, right? Now we move away from equality, we're talking about equity, because equity is about balancing resources. Equity is about balancing space, balancing privilege, such that even the weaker person has what they need. So for example, we're talking in terms of equity. So if the inheritance is like $1,000, everybody's supposed to get $1,000, right? And then you have a child who is probably physically disabled, and one who is everything is okay mentally or physically, whatever, and the total inheritance that needs to go out to the children, let's say there are about five children, and each child is supposed to get $1,000 each for inheritance. Now equality means that each child, regardless of how they were born, whether they were born in marriage situation, or they were born as, you know, outside of wedlock, whatever societal constructs, equality means that all the children are going to get that inheritance. Okay, that's equality. That's the equality we bring. Now equity means we're going to look at the circumstances of each child and try to make room for the ones that have they're going to need more by virtue of maybe some disability. Okay, we're not saying need more as privilege, like you would have us do in society. We say, oh, they're male, so let's give them the privilege of having more. No. Equity means you're looking at the weakest one and making up for their weaknesses, such that at the end of the day, when that weak one uses the resources allocated, that person will be at the same level as the others. Now, this is what Jesus was kind of alluding to when Jesus talked about the parable of the talents, you know, where you had a situation where the master gave one five talents, the other one 3, the other one. Okay, if you listen or reread that scripture, you're going to see that Yeshua, who we refer to as Jesus Christ in English, said that the master gave these talents according to the capability of the other. So in effect, the person who got more didn't get more necessarily as a sign of you're better than, but it's possible that that person was weaker. You know, that person probably didn't have as much training. That person probably doesn't have as much education. When you think about the person who got one talent, if you look at it, that person probably had more education, because he was giving financial analysis of the market. He was going into the banking things and all that stuff. So, you know, that person was smart. But the one who was giving the 5 talents didn't even, and the 3 talents, they didn't even have any negotiation. They just said, we just took it, we just did what you told us to do. You know, the people who were not thinking. So for those kind of situations, that's what we're talking about when we come to equity. With equity, you are looking at what are the limitations and how it's each person limited. And so you give more to the person who on their own and because of social or physical or mental limitations will not be able to do as well as the other person. So if we're talking equity among the mother's children, then we can understand why Rebecca had to go after Jacob. From birth, it seemed that Jacob was doomed already. He was red all over. You should not be giving birth to a kid who was red. For heaven's sake, you know that when a woman gives birth to a child, you know, you better be as normal as possible, meaning that you better look like everybody else, or you're going to be singled out for discrimination. So Jacob already came out looking all, you know, different, and he already got a bad name because he grabbed his brother's heel coming in. And here we come, the father favored Esau. And you know where that, as far as that is concerned, that means Esau gonna get everything from the father. And Jacob gonna be left with nothing. So as a mother, Rebecca was troubled. These two children, I fed them equally at my breast. But I'm watching day after day after day as Isaac is favoring one child above the other. This other child ends up feeling so neglected and needs that positive encouragement, always sitting home with me to be reassured of their love, of a parent's love. And Rebecca decided she's going to do something about this. That's how we see that the issue of usurping the birthright and the inheritance came in. It was about providing equity for that child who was going to be left behind. You know, that child who is going to be left out of the father's love. And we see that what Rebecca did was really a creation of equity. How do we see this? The blessing that Rebecca got for Jacob made him equal to his brother at the end of the day. Ask me how. Go and read the Genesis story where Jacob and his wives, Leah and Rachel, are coming back, right? And they meet up with Esau. What happens? The Bible describes that Esau was a great man. He had possession. He thrived. But also now we see that that greatness was also matched in Jacob's greatness. They both had equity. Without the father's blessing, Esau still made it. Without his father's blessing, he still made it. Now imagine if, in addition to his natural prowess, the father, he had obtained the father's blessing, Jacob would have been cracked. His name would not be heard of at all. That was a mother's insight to create those layers of equity, because she had already established equality with her breast. And so her remaining task was to create equity. I want to give this to us, like, we really need to pay attention to how women are presented in the world by God. If we want to find out about this God of the Hebrews, the God we call Yahweh, I don't mean any other God, because these days I'm telling people, when people say God, God is a generic term. Ask them, what God are you talking about? And what does your God say about this? Because the God of the Hebrews, Yahweh, is represented in the Hebrew scriptures as El Shaddai, the God that feeds us with your breast. We feed on the breast of God, and we are feeding on the breast of God. Only a mother can do that. And when we feed on a mother's breast, a mother's going to feed us equally at that breast. And that feeding us equally makes a mother aware of the strength of each of her children. If one child is a slow sucker, I tell you, you're going to give more time to that baby on the breast. If the other baby is a wild sucker, strong, muscular, you're going to give them less time, because you know that in a short time, they're going to pump out all that milk. But the other one that takes it easy, you're going to make time for them. That's equity. You're creating equity. And only mothers know how to do this. But you know what we can do as a society? We can start to learn to be like mothers. As fathers, we have to drop that idea that among father's children. Some are better, because that is contrary to what the God of the Hebrews, the Yahweh, the El Shaddai, is contrary to what that God does. For that God who we refer to as Father, but who's also described as Mother, on whose breast we feed in the Hebrew scriptures, that God cannot dislocate or disposition any of the human beings created in the image of that God to make one less, therefore giving them less care. The Bible talks to us about this God that opens, whose hands are open to satisfy the desires and the needs of every living thing, according to every living thing's capacity. It is not to take one, to diminish one, to give to the other. You get as you were created, your body was created, but it doesn't mean that you're better, because remember, in that mother's breast, no one child is better than the other. So so those are just some things. I know that there are things that you're going to think about, a little bit, and I hope that it starts to help us appreciate who God really is, the God of the Hebrews, El Shaddai, who El Shaddai really is, and also to appreciate our mothers and how God created mothers, and through motherhood we can start to create a just society, right? We can start to create equal and equitable society. So go and do likewise. Be like the God in whose image you were created. Use these concepts of God that have been demonstrated. Just before I go, I want to also talk about quickly another example in the scriptures where we see a mother helping to create this equality status. It was with this the great king we call Solomon, right? The product of Bathsheba and King David. He had the weakest status. So what did God do? God gave him the strongest position among all of David's children, that he might not be wiped out, and his place will be maintained among all of David's children. So go and do likewise. Look out for the weak. Look out for those who you think that societally they don't belong, because those are the ones that you really need to be giving more attention, more resources, more visibility, more opportunities. Because as you see with Esau and Jacob, Esau didn't lose nothing. He lost Jack by not having his father's blessing. He didn't lose anything. So at the end of the day, who really needed that blessing was Jacob, who it seems was how would I put it? He was not cursed. I don't want to use the word curse, but he was disadvantaged from birth. So let's go out and let's pour the resources, and let's stop arguing about privilege because of the gender. No, let's go out and let's try to be like El Shaddai. Let's try to be like mothers, creating equality and equity at our breasts. God bless you. Thank you for joining me today. Oh, and don't remember to share this video, and of course remember to check out our PayPal and help us by donating something to keep Vocu running. God bless you. Thank you.